Welcome to Nightmare Fuel Stories. The Signal. I've been the caretaker at the Blackrock Point Lighthouse for 17 years. 17 years of solitude broken only by supply deliveries and the occasional tourist who braves the narrow cliff path to see one of the last manually operated lighthouses on the eastern seaboard. Most folks think it's romantic, living in this towering sentinel, keeping watch over the treacherous waters. They don't understand what isolation really means. They don't know about the ships. The first time it happened was 3 years ago. A foggy April night, the kind where moisture hangs so thick in the air you can taste the salt on your tongue. I was in the watch room, logging weather conditions as I did every 3 hours. Wind from the northeast, 15 knots. Visibility less than a quarter mile, barometric pressure falling. The lighthouse beam cut through the fog in steady, mechanical sweeps, disappearing into the gray wall only to emerge again seconds later on the other side. I remember pausing mid-entry when I heard it, a ship's horn, low and mournful, not unusual in itself. Vessels often sounded their horns in fog, especially near the dangerous shoals that stretched from Blackrock Point like grasping fingers. But something about this horn made the hair on my neck stand up. It sounded wrong, too hollow, like it was echoing from inside a cave. I grabbed my binoculars and scanned the darkness beyond the beam's reach. Nothing at first. Then, as the light swept back around, I caught a glimpse of something, the silhouette of a ship where no ship should be. It was heading straight for the rocks. I dropped the binoculars and lunged for the radio. Vessel approaching Blackrock Point. This is Lighthouse Keeper Daniel Marlowe. You're on course for the shoals. Adjust heading immediately over. I waited, static. Unknown vessel. This is Blackrock Lighthouse. Do you copy? You're heading for danger. Please respond. More static, then a burst of sound I couldn't identify, like rushing water mixed with distant voices. I tried again, more urgently now. Vessel approaching Blackrock Point. Please acknowledge. You are in immediate danger. The horn sounded again, closer this time. I grabbed the binoculars and rushed to the window. The light swept across the water and I saw it clearly for the first time. It was an old steamer, the kind that hadn't sailed these waters for decades. Coal smoke poured from its single stack and its hull was a rusted, pitted mess. But what struck me cold was the name painted on its bow, SS Carrington. The Carrington had sunk off Blackrock Point in 1923. I blinked, certain I'd made a mistake. When I looked again, the ship was gone, just empty fog where it had been seconds before. I spent the rest of that night convinced I was losing my mind. Sleep deprivation, perhaps, or the beginning of some stress-induced hallucination. I'd been alone too long, that was all, but deep down I knew what I'd seen. The next morning dawned clear and bright, the fog burned away by the spring sun. I took my small motorboat out to the area where I'd spotted the phantom ship. The water was calm, betraying nothing of what had transpired the night before. I half expected to find wreckage, some evidence that a real ship had met its end on the rocks, but there was nothing. I never reported the incident. Who would believe me? A lonely lighthouse keeper claiming to have seen a ghost ship that sank nearly a century ago. They'd have me replaced faster than I could pack my meager belongings, so I kept it to myself and tried to forget. But it happened again, and again, always in fog or heavy rain, always ships that couldn't be there. The Carrington was a frequent visitor, but others appeared too. The Marion Blake, lost with all hands in 1957, the fishing trawler North Star, which capsized in a storm in 1986, and others I didn't recognize but later identified through old maritime records at the county library. Each time I tried to warn them, each time they vanished. I started keeping a private log of the sightings. Dates, times, weather conditions, which vessels appeared. I searched for patterns, some explanation that would make sense of what I was experiencing. The only constant was that these apparitions always came before bad weather, real storms that brought real danger to real ships. It was as if the ghosts were harbingers, drawn to Blackrock Point by the approaching tempests that mirrored the conditions of their own demise. I told myself I wasn't crazy, that somehow these visions were real. Perhaps the lighthouse itself was special, a place where the veil between worlds grew thin during certain atmospheric conditions. Or maybe it was me. Maybe years of solitude had given me some kind of second sight. Whatever the explanation, I came to accept my spectral visitors as part of life at Blackrock Point. They never harmed me, never even acknowledged me. They simply appeared, sounded their mournful horns, and vanished back into the mist. Until last month when everything changed. It began like any other stormy evening. Hurricane Elaine was churning up the coast, still a day away, but already sending powerful swells crashing against the rocks. The Coast Guard had issued warnings for all vessels to seek safe harbor, but I knew from experience that some would still be caught out in the worsening conditions. Sure enough, around 10 p.m., I spotted the lights of a ship in the distance. Through my binoculars, I could make out a small cargo vessel, perhaps 200 feet long, struggling against the rising seas. It was keeping a safe distance from the shoals, but its progress was slow. At that rate, it wouldn't outrun the hurricane. I was about to radio them when the fog horn sounded. Not from the cargo ship, this came from much closer to shore. That familiar, hollow moan that had haunted my nights for 3 years. The ghost ships were back. I swung my binoculars toward the sound and caught the Carrington emerging from a bank of fog that hadn't been there moments before. But something was different this time. The phantom vessel wasn't alone. Behind it in a grim procession came the others. The Marion Blake, the North Star, and at least a dozen more. They moved in perfect formation, as if guided by an unseen hand, their rusted hulls and tattered sails illuminated by the lighthouse beam as it swept past. And they were heading straight for the cargo ship. I grabbed the radio. "Cargo vessel northeast of Blackrock Point. This is Lighthouse Keeper Daniel Marlowe. Do you copy?" A crackle, then a response. "This is the Meridian." "We copy Blackrock. Meridian, you need to alter course immediately. Head due east." A pause. "Blackrock, we're maintaining safe distance from your position. Our heading is—" "Listen to me." I cut in. "You're in danger. There's something in your path. Please, just trust me. Alter course due east now." Another pause, longer this time. I could imagine the captain's confusion, perhaps consulting his radar, which would show nothing unusual. "Blackrock, our instruments show clear sailing. What exactly are you seeing?" How could I explain? I watched helplessly as the procession of ghost ships continued their inexorable approach toward the Meridian. They were moving faster now, impossibly fast given their size, closing the distance with unnatural speed. "Meridian, please," I begged. "There's no time to explain. You need to." The radio erupted with static so loud I yanked the headphones off. When I put them back on, all I heard was the hollow moan of the fog horns, somehow transmitting through the radio itself. Through my binoculars, I watched in horror as the ghost ships surrounded the Meridian. The cargo vessel's lights flickered, then went dark. For a moment everything was still. Then a wall of fog enveloped them all, so thick and sudden it seemed solid. When it dissipated seconds later, the sea was empty. The Meridian was gone. I reported the incident, of course. Said I'd lost radio contact with the vessel after warning them about the approaching hurricane. Said their lights had gone out and they'd disappeared into a fog bank. I didn't mention the ghost ships. Didn't mention how the Meridian had vanished in calm seas, still a day ahead of the storm's arrival. The Coast Guard launched a search and rescue operation at first light. They found nothing, no wreckage, no oil slick, no life rafts. The Meridian and its crew of 12 had simply ceased to exist. The official report cited a likely catastrophic structural failure due to rough seas, despite my weather log showing conditions had been manageable at the time of disappearance. The ship's owners demanded a more thorough investigation, but without evidence the case eventually went cold. I should have left then, should have walked away from Blackrock Point and never looked back, but where would I go? What would I do? The lighthouse was my home, my purpose, and part of me needed to understand what had happened, what I had witnessed, so I stayed, and I waited. For weeks after the Meridian vanished, the ghost ships were absent from my waters. No phantom horns in the night, no spectral vessels appearing in the fog. I began to hope, foolishly perhaps, that whatever dark chapter had been unfolding had finally closed. Then 3 nights ago I received a radio transmission that changed everything. It was just after midnight. A storm was building offshore, nothing serious, just a typical fall nor'easter. I was in the kitchen making coffee when the radio in the watchroom crackled to life. "Blackrock Lighthouse, do you copy? This is the Meridian." I froze, coffee pot in hand. It couldn't be. The Meridian was gone, had been for weeks. Yet the voice continued, distorted by static but unmistakable. "Blackrock, we're experiencing electrical failures and heavy fog. Request guidance to safe harbor." I set down the pot with shaking hands and moved to the radio. Part of me wanted to ignore it, to pretend I hadn't heard, but I couldn't. "This is Blackrock Lighthouse," I responded. "Please identify yourself again." "This is Captain Reynolds of the cargo vessel Meridian. We're approximately 2 miles northeast of your position and losing power. Need immediate assistance." Reynolds, that had been the name of the Meridian's captain. I'd seen it in the news reports. "Captain Reynolds," I said carefully, "the Meridian was reported lost at sea 4 weeks ago." Silence then. "What the hell are you talking about? We're right here and we need help now." My mouth went dry. Can you describe what you see around you?" "What I see?" The captain's voice rose in frustration. "I see fuck all because of this fog, and I see my instruments failing one by one." "Now are you going to help us or not?" I made a decision then. Maybe the wrong one, but the only one I could live with. "Captain, listen carefully. You need to alter course due east immediately. Do not, under any circumstances, approach Blackrock Point. East, that'll take us farther out to sea. The storm is the least of your concerns." I cut in. "Please trust me. Head east at full speed and don't stop until daybreak." There was a long pause. When Reynolds spoke again, his voice had changed, quieter, almost resigned. They're here, aren't they? The other ships, I can see them now. A chill ran down my spine. What do you see, Captain? Old ships, dozens of them there. Christ, they're all around us. His voice dropped to a whisper. There are people on the decks, but they're not. They don't look right. Captain Reynolds, get your ship out of there now. It's too late, he said softly. We can't move. Engines are dead, and they're boarding us. Who's boarding you? I demanded, but I already knew the answer. The dead, Reynolds whispered. The drowned, they're coming aboard, and, oh God, they're taking the crew. One by one, they want us to join them. Fight them, I shouted, though I had no idea how one fights the dead. Barricade yourself in. Use flares, anything. A horrible, gurgling laugh came through the radio. You don't understand, we already belong to them. Have since that night you tried to warn us. We've been sailing with them all this time, only now we're starting to. Remember, the static grew louder, nearly drowning out his words. They want me to tell you something, Reynolds continued, his voice now eerily calm. They say you've been chosen, the new keeper. The one who sees, what does that mean? I demanded. Chosen for what? To warn the worthy, to deliver the rest. Another of those terrible laughs. They're coming for you next, Marlowe. They need you to understand your purpose. The radio went silent for a moment, then erupted with the sound of dozens of foghorns blaring in unison, so loud I had to rip the headphones off. When the noise finally subsided, I cautiously put them back on. Captain Reynolds, Meridian, do you copy? Nothing but the soft hiss of empty airwaves. I spent the rest of that night in the watch room, binoculars trained on the darkness, radio tuned to the emergency channel. I saw nothing, heard nothing. When dawn broke, I took my boat out to where I estimated the Meridian had been. The sea was empty, the storm having passed offshore during the night. No sign of struggle, no debris. Just calm waters that revealed nothing of what had transpired in the darkness. I should have left then, should have packed my things and never looked back, but something held me at Blackrock Point. Perhaps it was Reynolds' words that I had been chosen, that I had a purpose. Or perhaps it was simple stubbornness, a refusal to be driven from my home by things I didn't understand, so I stayed, and I waited. Last night they came for me. It was the worst storm of the season, winds gusting to 60 knots, rain lashing the lighthouse with such force it seemed the whole structure trembled. I'd secured everything hours earlier, and now there was nothing to do but wait it out. I was in the living quarters, trying to distract myself with a book, when the power went out. Not unusual during a storm of this magnitude, the underwater cable that supplied electricity to the lighthouse was old and vulnerable. I set aside my book and headed up to the lantern room to start the emergency generator that would keep the light burning. That's when I heard it, not the familiar moan of a ship's horn this time, but something else, a sound like dozens of fists pounding on the lighthouse door. I froze on the spiral staircase, listening. The pounding came again, more insistent now, accompanied by voices, faint but unmistakable, calling my name. Marlowe, let us in, Marlowe. I crept down the stairs, heart hammering in my chest. Through the small window in the door I could see them, dark figures standing in the rain, their features obscured. But there was something wrong with their silhouettes. They seemed to shift, as if they couldn't quite hold their shape against the storm. We've come to show you, a voice called louder now. Come to help you understand. Understand what? I shouted through the door, though every instinct screamed at me to remain silent. Your purpose. Your duty. The voice was closer now, as if its owner had pressed against the door. You must choose who joins us. A different voice spoke then, one I recognized with a jolt of fear. Captain Reynolds, it's not so bad, Marlowe. Once you accept it, once you understand. Go away, I shouted, backing up the stairs. Leave me alone. We can't do that, Reynolds replied almost gently. You're the keeper now, the one who sees us. The one who chooses. The pounding intensified, and to my horror, I saw the heavy oak door begin to splinter. Whatever was outside, it wasn't entirely bound by physical limitations. I turned and ran up the stairs, taking them two at a time, not stopping until I reached the lantern room at the top of the lighthouse. The massive lens stood dark and silent, no longer sending its protective beam across the waters. I rushed to the emergency generator and yanked the starter cord. Once, twice, 3 times before the engine coughed to life. The lamp flickered, then blazed with light, the lens beginning its steady rotation. The pounding below stopped instantly. I moved to the windows, peering down at the lighthouse base. The figures were still there, dozens of them now, their faces turned up toward me. In the sweeping beam of the lighthouse, I could see them clearly for the first time. They were the drowned, men and women in clothing from different eras, their skin bloated and pale, seaweed tangled in their hair. Water poured from their open mouths as they called my name, the sound somehow carrying over the howling wind. Among them stood Captain Reynolds and his crew, newer additions to this ghastly congregation, but already showing signs of their fate, skin taking on that same bloodless pallor, eyes sunken and dark. The light swept across them again, and I noticed something I hadn't before. They weren't simply standing around the lighthouse. They were arranged in a formation that stretched down to the water's edge, a line like a receiving party. And emerging from the churning sea, climbing the rocky shore with unnatural purpose, came more of them. Hundreds more, the lost, the drowned, the forgotten. They were coming for me. I backed away from the window, mind racing. The door to the lantern room was sturdy, but it wouldn't hold them for long, not if they could splinter the main door below. As if reading my thoughts, a new pounding began, this time on the lantern room door. The wood bulged inward with each impact, the metal hinges groaning in protest. "You can't escape your duty, Marlowe," Reynolds called through the door. "Better to accept it. Join us willingly." "What duty?" I shouted. "What do you want from me?" "To guide them," came the reply. "The ships that shouldn't be saved, the souls meant for our fleet." The door cracked, a jagged split appearing down its center. "Like you guided the Meridian?" I asked, desperate to keep them talking while I searched for some way out. A low laugh. "You tried to save us, that's why you were chosen, you care. But you must learn to see the truth. Some are meant for salvation, others for our company." The door splintered further, and I caught glimpses of pale, bloated fingers working through the cracks, pulling the wood apart. "I won't do it," I said. "I won't condemn anyone to your fate." "You already have," Reynolds replied. "Every ship you've warned away from the others, every vessel you've saved. For each one spared, another must join us. That is the balance." The door gave way with a final crack, and they poured into the room, the drowned, the lost, their waterlogged bodies leaving puddles on the floor as they surrounded me. Captain Reynolds stood at their center, his skin the color of a fish's belly, his uniform still dripping seawater though he'd been dead for weeks. "It's time, Marlowe," he said, extending a swollen hand. "Time to take your place as the true keeper of Blackrock Point." I backed away until I hit the glass of the lantern room. There was nowhere left to run. "What happens if I refuse?" I asked, though I already suspected the answer. Reynolds smiled, revealing teeth that had begun to blacken. "Then you join us instead, and we find another to take your place." I looked past him, at the horde of drowned souls filling the lantern room and spilling down the staircase. Their empty eyes watched me with patient hunger. They would wait forever if necessary. Time meant nothing to the dead, and suddenly I understood. This had always been coming. From my first sighting of the Carrington 3 years ago, I had been marked. The previous lighthouse keeper, old Simmons, who'd left so suddenly after 30 years of service, he must have faced this same choice: become the arbiter of maritime fate or join the drowned. "What must I do?" I asked finally. Reynolds' smile widened. "Simply accept your role. The rest will come naturally. And if I do this, you'll leave, all of you," he nodded, "until we're needed again, until there's another ship to be judged." I closed my eyes, considering my options. There weren't many. I could fight and lose, I could jump and drown, or I could accept what was being offered. "How will I know?" I asked. "How will I know which ships to save and which to deliver?" "You'll know," Reynolds said simply. "The worthy reveal themselves, the rest," he gestured to the crowd behind him. "They're already marked." I took a deep breath. What choice did I really have? "I accept," I whispered. A sigh seemed to pass through the assembled dead, not of relief but recognition. They had known my answer before I gave it. Reynolds approached, his movement accompanied by the squelch of waterlogged clothes. He reached out and pressed his cold, damp palm against my forehead. "The keeper," he intoned, "the one who sees, the one who chooses." A shock of cold passed through me, so intense I gasped. For an instant I really saw, the true nature of Blackrock Point and the waters surrounding it. Not just a dangerous coastal feature, but a crossroads. A place where fates were decided, where the worthy were tested, where balance was maintained between the saved and the damned. When the vision cleared, I was alone in the lantern room. The door was intact, showing no sign of the violence that had broken it minutes before. Outside, the storm continued to rage, but the pounding had stopped. The voices had gone silent. I moved to the window and looked down. The rocky shore was empty. No crowd of the drowned, no procession of lost souls, just rain and wind and crashing waves. But in the distance, beyond the reach of the lighthouse beam, I could see them, a fleet of ghost ships waiting patiently on the horizon. My fleet now, my responsibility. I understood then what Reynolds had meant. I would continue as lighthouse keeper at Blackrock Point. I would maintain the light, log the weather, and warn ships of danger, just as I always had. But now I would also choose. Some vessels would receive my warnings and be guided to safety. Others would hear nothing as the ghost ships approached to claim them. The thought should have horrified me. Perhaps it still does, somewhere deep inside. But with the cold touch of Reynolds' hand came a strange acceptance. A knowledge that this has always been the way of things at Blackrock Point, long before I arrived and long after I'm gone. So I remain at my post, watching the waters, maintaining the light. Most nights are quiet, normal, but when the fog rolls in and visibility drops, I listen for the horns. I watch for the ships that shouldn't be there, and I choose. If you're ever sailing past Blackrock Point on a foggy night, and you see the lighthouse beam cutting through the darkness, pray that I find you worthy of salvation. Pray that your radio works when I call to warn you away from the shoals. Pray that you don't hear the horns of the ghost ships coming to claim you for their fleet. Pray that you never meet the true keeper of Blackrock Point.